This is the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera Original, or the BMPCC OG. It's a camera that came out in 2013, but buying this in 2025 comes with its own set of challenges. 8, in fact, in my opinion. So in this video, I want to talk about those 8 challenges and how you can overcome them if you're planning on getting one for yourself. Let's dive right in, and the first one would be the price. I got this back in spring at a local camera store here in Vienna for 690 euros, which is expensive. That's a lot of money for a camera like this. So right off the bat, I will tell you that depending on when you buy this, it is going to be overpriced. And I think mainly it's because of social media hype. Honestly, the main reason I started wanting to buy this one is because on Instagram at the time, there was this guy who started making these super nostalgic, super vibey videos that kind of stood out to me, in a scene where everyone is shooting high production cinema level quality, like super sharp images, to the point that you kind of know they're all using the same camera. They're all using an FX3. This person started posting these videos, and it's like, it was such a breath of fresh air in my opinion. And in some of his videos, you see him holding the camera in the reflection of a window or a mirror, and you see him hand holding it like it's such a tiny camera, right? And naturally, as a camera nerd, you're like, what is that camera? It's like so small. Like, what is he holding? And so, yeah, eventually I did find out that it was the OG. Circling back to my original point, the price, it's a little expensive. However, this morning when I was about to record this video, I just, out of curiosity, I went to mpb.com and I looked for it. And I saw it's right now it's selling for 519 euros. And I kind of feel bad now. That's why I said the price is dependent on when you check it. And I think if you are in the market for a Blackmagic OG, now might be a good time to check it out. The price is really good. When I was looking around and when I was trying to research this camera, the most common thing I would hear from people is that if you want to use this camera properly, you're going to have to rig it. You're going to have to buy a cage. You're going to have to buy an external monitor, buy a V-mount battery and all that stuff. So you end up with like a real cinema. It is a real cinema camera, but it becomes a lot bigger, right? So I was looking for something small with great image quality. And my intentions with buying the OG was basically I wanted a small pocket camera. I wanted to keep it pocket sized. It's a Blackmagic pocket cinema camera. So I really wanted to keep it minimal. I ended up not rigging it out actually. I have tried rigging it out and it's fun. But since buying this, I've used this as my everyday carry camera. And I just want it to be as small as possible. And mostly, the only thing I added onto this is, I don't have it right now, is a cold shoe mount from Newer, which I'll link in the description of this video. All of the things I will be discussing, I will link in the description of this video so you can check them out. But basically, I added a hot shoe so that I could use an external microphone if I wanted to, or I could even attach an external monitor, which I think, to be fair, you will want to use at certain times. So if you are wondering if you'll be able to make something, even if you don't spend for a rig, then yeah, definitely. I mean, most of the time, again, like I said, I use it as an everyday carry. And as an everyday carry, I'm not going to rig this out. I don't want to carry a V-mount in my bag all the time. As much as it is usable, the LCD screen can get pretty dim, pretty dark when you're shooting outdoors in broad daylight. And in those cases, in my experience, I just used an external monitor because it is going to be hard to judge the focus, even when you have the focus peaking on this monitor in broad daylight. It's just too dark. So if you are shooting outdoors, you will probably need an external monitor. Again, depending where you are, right? If you are in the shade, probably it's a lot usable. It's better. But if you're like in direct sunlight, it's not gonna work. So my route was to get an external monitor, to use an external monitor, and the one I use is around 5.5 inches. So it's nothing crazy. And it still keeps the footprint pretty small. And of course, if you are shooting tricky angles, then if you notice, the LCD is fixed, right? So if you are shooting out yourself, especially, it's gonna be hard to see yourself. Or if you are shooting some unique angles, then definitely an external monitor will help. But that's not to say that you will need it all the time, right? Like talking heads or you being in the frame, there's a lot of workarounds you can use to still be able to nail focus and use this camera. But I guess if you're doing like low angle shots where you really can't measure anything, that's when an external monitor really will come in handy, obviously. Of all the biggest problems that this camera is facing, I would say I agree with everybody who's reviewed it, especially when it comes to battery. Now, I don't want to confuse you because earlier I was just saying you can get away with it just as it is, right? But my point is you can use it like this. It's just that you're going to need a lot of these small batteries. If you don't want to rig it out, then you are going to need a lot of batteries, right? One, I don't even know how long it lasts. I just know that it's gonna run out. Like I don't keep it on. When I'm shooting with this, I don't leave it on. I shoot something, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, I turn it off. That's it. And I'm like always on the edge. So I'm always very what's the term? I'm always very conscious about the time spent that amount of time that this camera is on. So although while you can use it without, the batteries, definitely you're going to need a lot of them. But one thing that I've been trying, I actually got an NPF battery mount with a 12 volt to BMPCC cable. Again, I will link it in the description. So it's basically an NPF battery on a mounting plate with a cable that powers this directly. And the cable is quite long, so I can put the battery in my camera bag and I can shoot this whole handheld. So it really helps a lot when I'm just running and gunning, right? Especially for running and gunning situations. I just have a cable hanging out from my bag and I stop worrying about, running out of battery. And in terms of the overall experience, I would say it's been a lot of help. I actually prefer using it that way, especially I'm just like walking around. But I still carry with me the extra batteries. I have probably 3. And I will say if I didn't have the NPF, I would maybe get an additional 2 more to get me through a day, or at least an additional 3 more. So that's really how weak the battery is and how fast it runs out. By the way, if you enjoy talking about camera gear like this, then I'd like to tell you about my new book, Mastering Video Content Creation. It's already available to purchase today from bookshops like Thalia if you're here in Austria, Barnes & Noble, online stores like Amazon, just to name a few. It's a book that we divided into 3 chapters we like to call Consume, Create, and Curate, which I think we all know is what we spend most of our time as creators. Inside, you'll find some of my most used editing tricks, tips on things like how to price your work as a creator, and yeah, you guessed it, I talk a little bit about camera gear as well. So you can find the link in the description box below if you're interested to purchase. And I'd also like to take this opportunity just to thank the people who already have gone ahead and bought their copies and sent me the photos over on Instagram. I really appreciate it. So if you do end up buying one, please don't hesitate. Let me know on Instagram. Send me a photo. I'd love to see it. But for now, let's go back to this video. A lot of the SD cards that work with this are not available anymore, or at least kind of hard to find. In my experience and like going through the threads, people say it is very finicky with the SD cards. So I am going to link 2 SD cards that I found to work without any issues. One of them is a Kingston Canva SD card, I think, which is a cheaper alternative to a Sony Tough Card, which I found out also works. I think the Sony Tough Card isn't even on the list of compatible SD cards. But if you have one lying around because you already have newer cameras anyway, and you have a Sony Tough Card, then you'll be glad to know that it works as well. If you're buying this camera, you're coming into this whole thing knowing that fact already, that there is no stabilization, which means it's shaky, which means you probably need some sort of stabilization, right? And some people are turned off by cameras that don't have IBIS. Some people don't mind it. And like I said, it is a challenge you can overcome simply by using a tripod or a gimbal if you want to. And I have used it on a gimbal. My favorite way is using it on a tripod. And you'll be surprised that actually, if you want cinematic looking videos, if you want cinematic looking images, a static image will make it feel a lot more cinematic in my opinion. And I have grown to understand that fact, I have grown to learn that after some years that you don't really always need to be moving the camera anyway. And even more importantly, you can get a stabilized lens. Like the Lumix lenses have great OIS. So if I am running and gunning, like the setup I was talking about earlier, where I have the camera dangling from the bag and I'm just like holding this, I use a stabilized lens and it's really workable. Contrary to popular belief, the BMPCC OG does have autofocus. It's just that it does not move. So it's a static AF. It's like a single point AF, which also can be useful. You can use it. But for talking head situations, that's why it's not a vlogging camera. That's why it's hard to say. You don't really call it a vlogging camera, even though it looks like it feels like a vlogging camera. The size will make you want to just pull it out, right? But unlike a ZV-E10, for example, which you can whip out of your bag and just like point it at your face and start talking, and you know you're always gonna be in frame, it's gonna be in focus. This is not that. This is not gonna work like that. So when I'm using it, I would find a placeholder, nail the focus, stand in the spot. If I'm filming myself, I'm looking for something on the ground, fine-tuning the focus, or if for talking heads, I would probably place something in the general area where I'm gonna be in and just like set the focus. Plus, not having AF also gives you an opportunity to be a lot more creative or a lot more intentional with the shots, which I think again adds to the overall feeling of making your videos more cinematic, because it has a lot more intention behind it, and it's not just relying on autofocus, right? You can rack focus, you can keep some objects in the distance out of focus, bring them into focus, just part of the story. So it also opens up an avenue of creativity, in my opinion. Now, the BMPCC OG is a micro four thirds mount, but it is not a micro four thirds sensor. It's actually a Super 16 sensor, which means it's even smaller than a micro four thirds sensor, which if you are a part of the whole full frame movement, full frame is better movement, then you will not understand. You will be turned off. You will have your hesitations or like reservations about a camera with a sensor size this small, right? Because then you start asking questions about like what about depth of field? What about bokeh? What about low light situations, right? And you are right. Technically, a bigger sensor is better in all those aspects, but a bigger sensor does not make an image more cinematic. A blurrier background, which I have been led to believe, especially when I was starting out, and I had actively participated with, unfortunately, a blurry background does not mean a more cinematic image. In fact, if you take a while and look at the movies you're watching, you will realize that you can actually see the background. You can actually make out the background. And it's not like shot at f1.2, f1.4, 1.8 or something, which makes sense because you, as a film crew, as a film production company, you spent thousands and thousands of dollars into building the set, and then you're going to shoot at f1.2. Like, it doesn't make sense, right? Which means it doesn't really, like, especially with this camera, it actually makes it better. It helps the cost. So it's not really an issue. Like losing the blurrier background, losing the bokeh, it's not really about that, right? The deeper depth of field is actually another opportunity for intentional composition, for adding to the story. And which is what, in my opinion, again, comes down to like what makes an image more cinematic. Now, when it comes to low light, of course, this is not a camera you shoot at 12,800 ISO. It doesn't even go there. I think the maximum is like 1600. I could be wrong, 1600 or at least 3200, but most likely 1600. So it's not made for that. So it's like it's like going to a Jollibee and looking for a Big Mac. Like it's just not it. It's not that. Like for those reasons, you might be turned off. But at the same time, the biggest reason to get this camera is because of the sensor. Because out of all the cameras I own, I'm going to say this without exaggeration. In terms of image quality, this has now become my favorite one. Like, I need an excuse. I need a reason to keep bringing this out. And that's just how good it is. That's just how impressed I am when I'm looking at the videos that I take with this one. So while people will be turned off by the sensor size, I would argue that it's actually the sensor that gives it that cult following. Because again, as we've gone through, it's not technically better than any of the cameras right now. It's not, except for the way it puts out the image, the way it renders an image, which I think overthrows a lot of those quote-unquote disadvantages, right? So yeah, just to wrap things up, not a replacement for a modern-day cinema camera. It is overpriced, but again, depending on when you buy it, it might be a better deal. It is outdated, but the footage that you get out of this almost kind of makes up for everything else, in my opinion. Honestly, I wish Blackmagic comes out with an updated version. Like, if we can find a way to keep it at the same size, doesn't need to have a bigger battery, just a new motherboard so I don't have to keep turning it on and off, right? If you can't use the Fairchild sensor on this, like similar sensor, like just the idea of being able to catch cinematic quality image in a pocket size, like a phone camera, like a phone sized camera, a dedicated camera, is enough for me to want to buy this. And I think, honestly, if Blackmagic does come out with one, I will probably be checking it out. I hope this helps you out in making an informed decision. If you like this video, please don't forget to hit the like button. Consider subscribing if you haven't yet. And I guess I'll see you in the next one.